The day the Riverside Fire jumped the creek and started racing toward downtown Millbrook, Fire Chief Wade Patterson stood in Lena Kowalski's driveway, hat literally in his hands, asking if she could open her cisterns. By then, the town well had run dry. The tanker trucks were empty, and 16 structures were already burning. Lena looked at him, this man who'd called her investment, throwing money in a hole, and said, "I'll need to check the pressure valves first." She made him wait 10 minutes. But that was August. The story started 14 months earlier, in June, when Lena's truck rolled past the construction site on County Road 14, and she pulled over to watch them excavate for the new medical center. The backhoe operator waved when he saw her. Danny Ortiz. They'd gone to high school together, back when Millbrook had enough kids for a graduating class bigger than 30. "Lena, come to watch real work." She climbed out, walked to the edge of the pit. 20 feet down, maybe more. The soil layers told a story: topsoil, clay, then the ancient alluvial deposits that meant this whole valley had once been underwater, fed by a river system 10 times the size of the current Millbrook Creek. "You hitting water?" she called down. "Seeps. Nothing major. We're putting in pumps." Lena crouched, studied the weeping walls. The water table here sat maybe 30 feet down. Accessible, substantial, and completely wasted. They'd just pump it out, send it to the storm drains, let it run off to the creek. The drought had been building for 3 years. Subtle at first, shorter winters, earlier springs, summers that lingered into October. The old-timers talked about it at the feed store, compared it to 54, 76, the bad years. But nobody was doing anything. Not really. Lena drove home thinking about water. The Kowalski place sat on 280 acres at the valley's eastern edge, where the land started its climb toward the hills. Her great-grandfather had bought it in 1919, when the soil was cheap and the work was hard. 4 generations of Kowalskis had worked this ground, but Lena was the last. No husband, no kids, just her in the memory of her mother's voice. Land tells you what it needs. You just have to listen. She spent 2 weeks doing research. Aquifer maps, historical rainfall data, soil surveys. The Millbrook Valley sat above a confined aquifer, good water, under pressure, renewable from the mountain snowmelt. But the town's well system was old, insufficient, and the county had no plans for upgrades. Lena called Ben Morrison, the well driller. "I want to put in a cistern system. Big one." "How big?" 100,000 gallons. "Maybe more." Silence. Then, "Lena, that's commercial scale. What are you irrigating?" "Nothing yet. Call it insurance." "That's expensive insurance. We're talking $70,000, $80,000. Can you do it or not?" He could. They broke ground in July, 2 months before the town council meeting, where Lena stood up during public comment and suggested Millbrook invest in water storage infrastructure. Mayor Douglas Pemberton smiled the way you smile at someone's confused grandparent. "Ms. Kowalski, our current well system is adequate for the town's needs. Not if the drought continues. The National Weather Service isn't predicting anything unusual. They're predicting the same patterns we've had. That's the problem." Councilman Rick Hoffner leaned into his microphone. "Lena, I appreciate your concern, but we can't spend taxpayer money on speculation. If there's a real issue, the county will alert us." She sat down, filed the meeting away under, tried to warn them. At the feed store, Wade Patterson cornered her by the fencing supplies. "Heard you're putting in some kind of water system." "That's right." Ben Morrison said it's huge. "Said you're going 60 feet down." 55. Wade laughed. "What are you doing? Building a swimming pool?" "Something like that. Hell of an expensive hole in the ground." She met his eyes. "Won't be a hole when it's full." The construction took 4 months. 2. 50,000-gallon tanks, reinforced concrete, buried under what used to be her grandfather's hay barn. A well system with dual pumps. Filtration. A backup generator. Ben Morrison shook his head every day as the scope expanded. "You're building municipal infrastructure on a farm. I'm building resilience. Your neighbors think you're crazy." "My neighbors thought my mother was crazy when she kept the Heritage Apple Orchard. Then Creston Cider Company paid $20,000 for her heirloom fruit." Ben hammered in the last pressure gauge. "Fair point. By November, the system was operational. Lena could pull 300 gallons per minute from the aquifer, store it, filter it to drinking standard. The tanks filled over 6 weeks, 100,000 gallons of cold, clean water sitting under reinforced concrete, and 3 feet of soil. Her neighbor, Jim Stravinsky, rode over on his four-wheeler to see it. That's it. Just looks like dirt. That's the point. What did this run you? 100 grand. About that. He whistled. Could have bought a new tractor. Hell, could have bought two. Could have. What are you gonna do with all that water? Lena looked at the hills, where the trees were already showing stress, the pines turning yellow. Hope I never need it. Jim laughed. Well, if you ever want to open a car wash. The joke spread. At church, someone asked if she was starting a fish farm. At the co-op, Dennis Merrick said she must be planning to sell bottled water. The laughter was friendly mostly. Just Lena being Lena. Eccentric, overprepared, spending money on things nobody understood. Her cousin Ray called from Portland. Mom says you buried water tanks. I did. Why? Because everyone's laughing now. The winter was dry. Spring was worse. April brought 3 inches of rain instead of the normal 8. By May, Millbrook Creek was running at 40% of normal flow. The town council held an emergency meeting and voted to implement voluntary water restrictions. Still adequate, Mayor Pemberton announced. But we're asking residents to be mindful. June arrived with temperatures that broke records. The grass turned brown. The creek dropped further. At the July meeting, the restrictions became mandatory. No lawn watering, no car washing, no filling pools. Lena's tank sat full and untouched. She ran her household on well water, used the cistern reserves for the livestock, 40 head of cattle, her poultry, the 2 horses. Every evening, she checked the levels, the pumps, the pressure gauges. Everything held steady. The farm stayed green. Not lush, she wasn't wasteful, but functional. The cattle had water. The garden produced. Life continued while her neighbors watched their ground crack and their ponds shrink to mud. How are you managing? Jim Stravinsky asked, riding his four-wheeler along the fence line. His pastures looked like drought studies, bare soil, stressed grass, cattle clustered around a shrinking pond. Doing okay. Your stock tank's full. It is. He studied her system. The filling station by the barn, the overflow running to a small wetland she'd constructed downslope. That water tank thing. That's what's keeping you going. Yes. Guess it wasn't such a crazy idea. Guess not. By mid-July, Millbrook's main well was producing at 60% capacity. The town brought in water trucks twice a week, filled the system from the county reservoir 40 miles away. Each delivery cost $8,000. The mayor stopped calling it adequate. The fire started on August 12, 15 miles east in Riverside. Lightning strike in the state forest, where the undergrowth was tinder dry and the humidity hovered at 15%. It burned for 2 days before the wind shifted. Lena smelled smoke that evening while feeding the chickens. She turned on the radio, found the emergency broadcast. Riverside fire now at 2,800 acres. Mandatory evacuations for zones 3 and 4. Voluntary evacuations for Riverside downtown. She called Ben Morrison. Can the cistern system support fire hoses? You're set up for it. What? Just checking. The fire jumped containment lines on August 14th. By the time Lena woke up on the 15th, the smoke had turned the sunrise orange and ash was falling like dirty snow. She drove into town at 8 a.m. The volunteer fire department was staging at the community center. Wade Patterson looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight. Red eyes, soot-stained uniform, moving with the jerky urgency of someone running on adrenaline and coffee. We're evacuating the east side, he told the assembled volunteers. Fire's 3 miles out and moving fast. We've got trucks positioned at, he stopped. We got a problem. What problem? Someone asked. The town well's down to 18%. We've got maybe 6 hours of firefighting capacity, and the county takers won't make it here before this afternoon. The room went quiet. What about the creek? Jim Stravinsky asked. He'd volunteered, like most able-bodied men in town. Too low. We burn out the pumps trying to draft from it. Lena raised her hand. I have water. Wait, looked at her. Your well. My cisterns. 100,000 gallons. Filtered. Pressurized. You're 3 miles out of town. I'm 2 miles from the fire line. And I can supply 300 gallons per minute through 2-inch connections. Wade's face did something complicated. Embarrassment. Relief. Something that might have been respect. You let us tap it? That's why I built it. Lena, I said some things. You did. And now you need water, and I have it. We can discuss your opinions later. By 9 a.m., 2 fire trucks were positioned at her property. hoses running from her system to their tanks. The water flowed, clear and cold, pumped from 55 feet underground. Lena monitored the pressure, managed the valves, kept the system running at optimal capacity. The fire hit the eastern edge of Millbrook at 11:15. For 8 hours, the volunteer department fought it, house by house, field by field. They soaked the structures, created fire breaks, saved downtown. The water came from Lena's cisterns, measured, steady, exactly enough. By sunset, the fire had been pushed back to the containment line. 16 structures lost, all of them outlying barns and sheds. 0 homes, 0 lives. Wade came back to Lena's property at 8 p.m. after the immediate crisis passed. She was sitting on her porch, monitoring the tank levels on her tablet. 62,000 gallons remaining. He climbed the porch steps, sat down uninvited, stared at his hands. "You saved the town," he said finally. "I had water. You did the work. Don't." He looked at her. "Don't be gracious. I was wrong. I laughed at you. Yes. I called it throwing money in a hole. You did. How did you know?" Lena set down the tablet. "My mother taught me to listen to the land. The land was telling us the water was going. Everyone heard it. They just didn't want to believe it cost money to prepare." Wade nodded slowly. "The council wants to meet with you. Tomorrow. They want to. I don't know. Thank you. Ask advice. I'm not an engineer." "No. You're smarter. You're someone who listens." He left. Lena stayed on the porch, watching the orange glow on the eastern horizon, smelling smoke and summer heat, and the particular scent of a community that had just learned the difference between adequate and prepared. The town council meeting was standing room only. Lena sat in the front row, uncomfortable with the attention, wishing she was home checking her cattle. Mayor Pemberton stood at the podium. For once, he'd left the political smile at home. "Miss Kowalski, on behalf of Millbrook, I want to thank you. Your foresight and generosity saved this town." Polite applause. Lena nodded. "We'd like to discuss purchasing water from your system until our situation stabilizes." "No." The room went quiet. "Ma'am, you can't purchase water from me because I'm not a municipal supplier and I don't want the liability. But I'll share my research, the data I used, the aquifer maps, and I'll help you design a proper system." Councilman Hoffner leaned forward. "A system like yours? Bigger. Millbrook needs at least 500,000 gallons of storage. Multiple wells. Redundancy. It'll cost maybe $3 million. Pemberton winced. "That's a significant investment. Cheaper than the alternative." "The alternative being? Next time, I might not have enough water to save you." The council voted unanimously to pursue the project. They hired Ben Morrison, brought in a hydrogeologist, applied for state infrastructure grants. Lena served as an unpaid consultant, walked them through the geology, showed them where to drill. The story spread beyond Millbrook. Agricultural Extension Services called. Other towns asked for her data. A journalist from the state capitol drove out to interview her. "How did you know?" he asked, standing by her barn, recording on his phone. "I listened. But specifically, I looked at rainfall trends, aquifer recharge rates, and climate projections. I asked what would happen if the drought continued. And I decided that being wrong was cheaper than being unprepared." The article ran under the headline, "Farmer's Foresight Saves Town." It made her uncomfortable, but it brought more visitors. Small towns facing water issues. Farmers worried about irrigation. People who'd been laughed at for suggesting preparation. Jim Stravinsky came by in September, after the first real rain in 4 months. "I'm putting in a cistern. Nothing fancy like yours. Just 20,000 gallons. Good. Gonna cost me near 15 grand. It will. Everyone said I should have done it years ago. Easy to say now." Lena smiled. Easy to say. Hard to do. That's the difference. The town's new system broke ground in October. Wade Patterson stopped by the construction site daily, learning, asking questions. He'd enrolled in emergency management courses, started pushing for updated fire response plans. "I never want to run dry again," he told Lena. "You won't. Not if you maintain it. Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why'd you help us?" After we laughed. Lena considered the question, watching the excavator dig. "Because being right isn't the point. The point is the work. I wasn't angry at you, Wade. I was disappointed. There's a difference." He nodded. "I'm trying to be less disappointing. I can see that." By November, Lena's cisterns had recharged to 85%. The rains had come, Not enough to break the drought, but enough to ease the immediate crisis. The fire department held a community dinner in her honor. She accepted a plaque, said thank you, left before dessert to check on a cow showing signs of early labor. Her phone rang constantly now. Consulting requests. Speaking invitations. A university wanted her to guest lecture. She turned down most of it, accepted some, the ones where she could see the practical application, where communities were genuinely ready to listen. Christmas brought Jim Stravinsky to her door with a bottle of whiskey. For saving my stubborn ass. My cattle would have died without the water you shared. You would have figured something out. Maybe, but your way was better. He shifted his weight. My kid's studying environmental engineering. College. Says he wants to work on water systems. Good field to be in. Yeah. He asked me if he could interview you. For a project. Sure. Have him call. Jim. Left. Lena stood in her doorway, looking at the land she'd inherited, the system she'd built, the infrastructure humming quietly underground. The work continued. The drought hadn't ended, but the town would survive it now, and maybe, if enough people listened, other communities would prepare before crisis forced them to. Her mother used to say that farming was about planting for harvest you might not see, about trusting that the work mattered even when no one else understood it, about proceeding forward with the quiet confidence that comes from listening to what the land needs. Lena Kowalski closed the door against the December cold, walked to her office, and pulled up the aquifer data. The county to the south had called about consultation. Their well system was aging. They wanted to know what she'd recommend. She opened a new spreadsheet and started typing. The water tables didn't care about vindication or validation. They just existed, waiting for someone to pay attention, someone to listen, someone to do the work before the crisis came. Outside, snow began to fall, light, tentative, the first real moisture in 2 months. Lena watched it through the window, calculated how it would affect the recharge rates, and returned to her work. The land would tell her what it needed. She just had to keep listening.